Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to finish up the bodywork on the Scania 770S. Most of it's already complete, all that's left is the bumper, which is a little bit more involved than you might think. Okay, we're up to step 71, the headlight assemblies. Now, off camera, I've painted the chrome parts as the manual says. It's painted with Tamiya matte black. Seeing what you're doing can be a bit tricky though. With the chrome it's hard to see what's going on. Take your time and position some lights before you start painting and you should be okay. In addition to the chrome buckets, there's GG1 and 2, the silver trim parts, and BB4 and 5, the orange lenses. First, the silver trim needs to get glued into the buckets. Start by placing the trim into the buckets dry to get a feel for where the glue needs to go. We won't need much as the trim's going to be behind the headlight lenses, so we only need enough to stop them from falling off. I found a little on the outside edge and a little under where the straight bit sits does the trick. Just a couple of spots, spread it out, and that's all we're going to need. Then we carefully position the trim and let it harden up for a little while before moving on. Once it's grabbed, we can add a little more glue to the outside where the orange lens goes. Just a thin bead is all we need. Then we position the lens so it's nice and square and we leave it alone for a while to dry. We'll be handling the buckets in the next step, so it's a good idea to leave it a little while, an hour or two, so we can't knock the trim or the lenses off. Okay, step 72, the underbar and headlight lenses. We need 5 2x8 self-tappers, 2 2x6 self-tappers, 3 2mm washers, AA 6, 9, 11 and 12 the lenses, H1 the bumper, which I've painted to match the cab, and following the kit build we'd be using DD1, the under bumper bar, a rather nice chrome plastic part, but I wanted some lights down there so we're going to go aftermarket. So here we have yet another bit from AliExpress. We've got a metal bar, some LEDs and some brackets. The bar is of pretty good quality, not that there's much to get wrong of course. The main thing is it's nicely polished and there's no burrs around the holes. It comes with some pre-wired LEDs. I think one set's white and the other's yellow, but I'm going to be making a custom set. Then we have the mounting brackets, but it's not immediately obvious how they fit, and of course there's no instruction sheet. Thankfully there's some pictures on the store page that might help. Lastly, there's the screws. They're rather small, so you do need to be a bit careful not to lose them. Also, there was this little rectangle of paper. Not sure what it's for, but it was there. If we look at one of the pictures from the product page, we can see the triangle bracket goes in the middle, which is fairly obvious. Then we have the 2 small brackets on the next holes out. What we can't really see is where the L-shaped brackets go, but there's only one more pair of holes on the side where you can see the side of the screw heads, so they must go there. I'm thinking they mount up with the tab bent at 90 degrees and we use some double-sided tape to attach them to the bottom of the bumper. Okay, before we can actually try it, we need to cut the parts from the surround. Some sharp cutters work fairly well, but they can be a bit tricky. Just watch out as the edges can be extremely sharp and the nubs left from cutting the parts free can cause some blood loss. So once they're cut out, use a small file to smooth off all the edges. Okay, we'll start by attaching the middle and 2 narrow brackets to the bar. Then offer it up to the bumper to see how we need to bend them. There's no jig, so we'll have to do it by eye. All 3 need to step in towards the bumper. Now I'm going to use some pliers to make sure the bends are nice and straight. We want to get as close as we can, but it's going to need a few tweaks to get everything spot on. Okay, sometime later, and I have the 2 narrow brackets lined up so the bar is just under the bumper. The middle bracket though is lined up over the hole in the bumper, but there's a small gap. But we'll attach the 2 small brackets, then work out what to do with the middle one. So on the ends we'll fit the L brackets with some double-sided tape. Once they're stuck down we can nip up the screws, and the bar is now fairly well attached, although I do wonder how long that tape's going to last. We might end up having to drill and screw the brackets to the bumper. And now the bar's nice and stable, we can see just how big the gap is under the centre bracket. And after a bit of trial and error, I found an M3 half nut is the perfect size. We just need to pop it in the gap and use a longer screw to attach it. A spare 2x6 self-tapper from the truck kit does the job. Just be careful if you're doing the same that it's not too long and it might just poke out the front. Now we need to go around and nip up all the screws, and that's the bar fitted. Next up, we'll fit the light buckets and the lenses. Now, usually I try and fit the lenses without using any glue, just to keep things clean and tidy. But I found during the test fit, the small lower lenses are just a little bit loose, and the buckets leave a small gap. I don't think they'd fall out, but it's not ideal, so we are going to need to glue them in. We just need a tiny spot on the bumper where the flanges sit, then we just drop the lenses in. And as usual, we need to leave them a little while to harden up before we handle things too much. Next we offer a headlight lens up to the front of the bumper from the inside, and we slot in a light bucket. To attach them we use a 2x8 from the outside through the lens and the bumper, threading into the light bucket. Then on the inside towards the bottom of the bucket we use a 2x6. Nip them up and that's one bucket fitted. We just need to do the same on the other side, and you end up with quite a nice looking setup. There's a lot of detail in those headlights. Right, step 74, the lower grille lights. We need the grille R7, which I've already painted, and added the trim bits R2 and R4. They've also had a couple of holes drilled for the light bar. For fixings we have two 2x8 self-tappers and two 2x6 self-tappers. The light bar parts are DD4, the bar, DD3 the LED clips, and FF1 the orange insert for the running lights. First then, we stuff the orange bar into the chrome bar just under the light pods. We'll end up adding LEDs in there too, but I'm not sure if we're going to freehand it or if I'll get an LED strip to fit. The trouble is, with the strip, it probably won't be set up electrically how I want it, so whatever we do, we're going to end up having to do some careful wiring. On the back of the bar, we can offer up the LED clip and install the two 2x6s. On the front, we would also install the 4 EE2 lenses, but for the LEDs I'm planning to use, there's going to be some modifying to do first, so we're going to leave the lenses off just for the time being. Next, we offer up the bar to the grille and install the two 2x8s. For the holes, you'll need to drill a couple out with a 2mm bit, but Tamiya provide moulded in dimples in the spots you need to drill, so it's really simple. Same goes for the slots for the wiring. On the back of the trim strips, it's marked exactly where you need to cut the plastic. It really takes the stress out if you're not too happy cutting into an otherwise perfectly good part. Step 75, fitting the grille and LED clips. We need two 2x8 self-tappers, four 2x6 self-tappers, N1 and N2 the lower LED clips, W3 and 4 the upper LED clips, and the grille and the bumper. First, the LED clips can go on. Now, we're going to be taking them off again when we fit the LEDs, but it's good to fit them, partly so we don't lose the bits, and partly so we can size things up for the wiring. All the LED clips are fitted with the 2x6s. They're a bit fiddly to line up, so do be careful. It's easy if you're pressing fairly hard to slip before the screw starts to thread in. Next we slot the grille into the front of the bumper, flip it around, and we thread in the two 2x8s. Nip them up and that's the bumper complete. Step 76, fitting the bumper, which also includes the little mirror that fits over the passenger door. Now I've put it together, just U4 and N13, but I'm not going to fit it. It just glues to the side of the cab, and in my experience, unless you're incredibly careful, it'll break off, leaving an unsightly scab where the glue has attached to the paint. Now I do wonder if it could be magnetically mounted, but for now we'll just leave it off. Also, before we fit the bumper, I'm going to stick on a number plate. Nothing special, just the stock part and sticker. All we do is use a bit of double-sided tape to attach it. The plate has a couple of little nubs that line up with the holes, so it's really easy to get it in just the right spot. To fit the grille, we will use two M3 nylock nuts and two M3x18 cap heads. The nuts press into hex holes on the back of the mount on the chassis, then we offer up the bumper and thread in the two screws, which should be easy, but the nuts do have a tendency to drop out if you press too hard. But once you've got the thread going, they're not too bad. Nip them up, and well, that's the truck rolling. There's still loads of electronics to install, most of which is going to be custom, lights, sound and all that good stuff. We'll have a look at that once it's all set up and go through roughly how it's all hooked up. If you've been following the build, you'll know we spent quite a bit of time on the steering setup. We've got an aftermarket axle with bull race knuckles, aluminium knuckles, RC four-wheel drive rod ends and an aluminium bell crank. But what difference does that actually make? So here we are for a quick test. On the left is a MAN 6x4 with a stock setup, except there's a solid servo arm rather than a servo saver. On the right is the Scania with its hopped up steering. Both trucks are at full steering lock. The MAN is set up so when the wheels are off the ground, the knuckles go as far as they can before colliding with the axle. When driving though, there's so much slop in the system, a large amount of the movement is lost. Just changing the rod ends does help, but the Scania with the custom setup is in another league. Manoeuvring on a tight layout is so much easier. Taking tight corners is so much less stress. It's a really nice setup. Also, the Scania is running a Hobbywing Fusion SE 1200 kV, a brushless system designed for off-road crawlers. It's super smooth, plus has a huge amount of torque at very low RPM. The worry was it might be too fast to be practical. But compared to the MAN, which has a 80 turn 540, it's not really all that different. Fast enough to get a cruise going in an open space in top gear, but not so crazy it's going to be a danger indoors. There's still loads to do to the Scania, but it's mostly the fiddly, time-consuming stuff that's left. LED wiring, making custom bits for mounting things, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure when we're going to have some progress to look at, but it'll get there bit by bit. Right, as always then, thanks for watching. Like if you like, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!